And we're back. This is our last video on unconditional self-worth. The sun came back out for this one. And in this video, we will be talking about some shorter term strategies to build self-worth. And I was thinking about this. I had dinner with a friend last night, and he shared something from his own experiences that really stood out to me and speaks to the theme of this video. And this friend was telling me that he's learned in his own life that the fastest way to get over fear is not to go around it, but through it. The same is true for low self-worth, for negative feelings and fears we may have about ourselves. The fastest way to get over it is through and not around. And how do we go through low self-worth? We go through where these feelings live and express themselves, the body. So these are really body-focused and emotion-focused strategies because more than anything, self-worth is a visceral and embodied state of being. Self-worth changes the way you feel in your mind and body, and over time, it actually changes the way your body functions, creates more resilience to stress, and is basically a protective factor that improves our mental and physical health. So yes, these strategies are, like I mentioned, more emotionally intense, but they can produce a significant difference in your baseline feelings about yourself in weeks to months compared to our gradual strategies where we were looking at several months to a few years. These strategies are also social, but in a different way. For the tools I'll be naming, I would not recommend using these tools on your own. You're losing out on potentially half the healing if you do so. You could think about having a power tool, but only using it at half power if you are trying it on your own. So my main recommendation is going to be working on this with a trauma-informed therapist. Some of the tools I'll name at the end are appropriate to do with a safe person, group, community space, but given my recommendation that this be a guided process, I'm not going to be sharing a how-to in this video as much as explaining the mechanics of how these tools and strategies work. That way you can understand them, you can seek out the most helpful support for what you're going through, and hopefully leave this video just feeling more hopeful and optimistic that even the most deep-seated and painful feelings you have about yourself, the most deep-seated fears, can shift and change and heal. Now, who are these tools the most suitable for? The tools that I've named, a lot of them are focused around healing trauma or like chronic toxic stress, but they actually help with a lot of other mental health symptoms. I've used these tools to help clients with generalized anxiety, panic disorder, mood disorders, ADHD, OCD, eating disorders, complicated grief, and chronic pain is, some body focus like pain. So outside of like any particular diagnoses or like symptom cluster, these tools are helpful for anyone who gets stuck or maybe spirals on a particularly painful emotion or thought cycle that's affecting you in your daily life, affecting your mood, your behavior, your decision making. And this can be also for anyone who feels stuck on events from the past that are preventing you from fully living your life in the present. Finally, I want to say there is a timing for when it's the most effective and helpful to use these tools. These tools are best suited for someone who is generally feeling safe, has their basic needs met, and somewhat stable in that they already have at least some coping tools, and things that you're doing that help you with your mental health. So our basic formula, what are we doing here for this shorter term somatic approach? I'm going to be walking through what's essentially an exposure formula. The steps that I identify come specifically from EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, But other types of therapy use a similar approach and have similar outcomes in terms of their effects on our brains and nervous systems. So our formula is step 1, identify the main negative feelings and unconscious core beliefs you have about yourself. In this first step, you can also explore the significant past experiences that these negative beliefs and feelings may come from, and dig into the ways that your past is still impacting you today. That being said, while understanding the past roots of our present day feelings and beliefs is helpful and enlightening, it isn't necessary for healing. What we really just need to know is what is happening for you present day in terms of the main beliefs and feelings that you have about yourself. And then we're going into our second step, which is healing negative beliefs and the past painful experiences that they connect to. Again, you don't have to have identified every past painful experience. Focus on identifying that negative belief or feeling first and foremost. Third, this is the last step, we're just strengthening and reinforcing positive core beliefs and positive experiences and emotions that you have had. So I keep talking about core beliefs, which are basically the most significant beliefs we have about ourselves. What are they? Why do core beliefs matter, and how does this relate to somatic work? Unconscious core beliefs are basically neurological pathways that have come to wire and fire together through time and experience. So what we're really trying to do here is heal and shift the wiring of our brain and nervous system, especially in regards to how we perceive ourselves and handle stress. For these strategies, again, working with the body and the nervous system is fundamental. This isn't something you can talk or think your way through. This is something we're feeling our way through. And while talking is helpful, that's going to bring us back to our gradual approach strategies. Our goal with these somatic strategies is to increase the flexibility of how you respond to stress, build more ways to cope with stress, and that's going to deepen your self-efficacy, which is basically your belief in your ability to achieve what you want and overcome challenges. We're right back again to those unconscious core beliefs. Do we believe in our worth and capability? And why do core beliefs matter so much? Watch the first What is Unconditional Self-Worth video to get the full explanation for that. What I want to focus on here is we are unconsciously reinforcing both the positive and negative beliefs we hold about ourselves through confirmation bias every day. And so when we identify our main beliefs about ourselves, we also start to see how we're actually reinforcing them through the way we behave, what we focus on, and how we interpret events. How do we develop an unconscious core belief about ourselves? Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, I am just a trauma-informed therapist. But what I want to focus on here is basically our brains perceive and filter in outside events that happen to us by automatically encoding those events according to their underlying emotion and the strength and perceived importance of that emotion. So experiences that share a similar underlying emotion over time will come to link in a neurological web. And that means when we have a present day experience with the same underlying emotional tone as past experiences, if that present day experience is strong enough, it may activate the whole past web of experiences that share that similar emotion. I want to give an example here. Let's say I have a moment and a trigger for shame that comes up for me. I'm at a work meeting, I'm sharing a new idea that I'm really excited about, and a colleague comes in and interrupts and just dismisses my idea in front of everyone at this group meeting. and I have shame that comes up from this experience. If I have experienced other events that have a similar emotion, and that shame at the office today is strong enough, that experience isn't just triggering the shame I felt from the colleague interrupting me, but actually activating that whole past web of other experiences where I also felt shame. So I might be feeling shame for what happened today, and also all those past experiences of shame that are hitting me all at once. So hopefully that makes sense. Basically, core beliefs, what we're really just talking about are words that we're using to describe one particular emotional web of events stored in our brain. And the stronger the emotions in that neurological web, the more influence those emotions and beliefs exert on our present day perceptions and behaviors. Basically because those neurological pathways have come to fire and wire together more strongly through time and repetition. What happens when a core belief of ours is triggered? Certain parts of our brain then fire up and come online or offline based on what emotion this experience brings up, and if it's connected to like fear or a survival response. Then, based on what parts of our brain are activated and firing, our nervous system responds with a matching level of activation, heightening and preparing for threat, or deactivation and regrounding. And our nervous systems are the command centers for our whole body. They connect to all of your organs, your muscles, your glands and your hormones, your immune system, your digestive system. The vagus nerve in particular connects to every major organ in your body. It's basically like an information highway from your brain, sending information down to your organs, and then from your organs back up to your brain. And with that, how our nervous system responds to an event has a ripple effect out on your entire physical functioning. Again, hormone levels, immune response, heart rate, blood pressure, digestive system. So what happens specifically when we experience a negative or stressful event in our brain and nervous system? When we are experiencing a threatening event, or even just perceive there to be threat, our amygdala and limbic system activate. These are like emotion and fear-based parts of the brain. The limbic system in particular is one of the oldest parts of our brain. You may have referred to it as like lizard brain. It's very like fear and survival oriented. And then our nervous system activates into fight or flight. And if we can't fight or flight, if we're feeling stuck or trapped or helpless, we might go all the way up to the last nervous system state, freeze, or dorsal vagal shutdown. This whole response happens both with real threats and perceived threats to your safety and well-being. And you all might be imagining like threats to like your physical safety or health. I want to talk about actually a different kind of threat that activates the same response, and that's social threats. As a social species, events that pose a threat to our sense of social belonging and acceptance can also trigger this life or death limbic response. And that's because for most of human history, social exclusion was life-threatening. When we're looking at hunter-gatherer societies or small agricultural communities, not being accepted by your community or tribe and this risk of being cast out or excluded from your community could very well result in a serious risk of injury, deprivation, or even death. And that was the case for most of human history. Our bodies are still wired that way. So I say this hoping we can remember and use this information to basically increase our compassion around why social rejection, even the fear of social rejection, can be such a debilitating stressor. So, second piece I want to add in here, when our amygdala and limbic system come online, We also can't access our prefrontal cortex. This is the rational part of our brain, the part of our brain that's really been developed in humans especially. And this rational part of our brain has gone offline, which means we can't access our usual coping skills. And without outside help or support or helpful resources, being locked out of our rational mind, unable to cope, can leave us feeling stuck and again trapped and create a frozen memory. When they're triggered, frozen memories often bring us right back to feeling as if we were in that original incident, reliving the same vivid emotions and sensations as we did at that time. Because of that, triggered frozen memories can hijack our whole brain functioning. They're blocking us again out of the adaptive neural network, which is our ability to problem solve, reason, think long term, like weigh out consequences, and even ask for help. The intensity of the emotions that we experience for these frozen memories is really what determines how much of an impact a frozen memory has on us today. So here we are, we understand what core beliefs are and what happens in our brains and bodies when they're triggered. Now what? What do we do with this information? This is where I'm going to strongly recommend working with a therapist. Receiving support here is essential. And that's because having someone to facilitate and support this process, even according to the evidence, is almost as healing as the tools themselves. This is, I think, coming from the place, we are wired to survive and thrive as humans through collaborative social interaction. And therefore, we also heal more effectively in safe relationships in comparison to alone. And this person or guide or therapist that you're working with, what they're there for is to provide an honest and compassionate mirror that's reflecting unconditional positive regard at you, what you're trying to build and connect to in yourself. They're also there to support you during the painful emotions that come up, so you know you're not alone. And just providing accountability and structure to keep the process moving if you get stuck at any points in this. What are you doing with this therapist or guide? This is where we get to talk about some really exciting, newer and evolving research and therapy tools. Where I want to start in terms of some of the best evidence-based approaches that I know and use with my clients is, again, EMDR, I have movement and desensitization reprocessing, and internal family systems, IFS. I use both of these tools together. They pair wonderfully. These are both tools that allow us to tap into and rewire unconscious core beliefs, heal past painful experiences, and therefore desensitize past triggers and painful emotions. Depending on what you're struggling with, some other tools that can be really effective and are evidence-based include exposure and response prevention, somatic or mindfulness-based therapy, acceptance and commitment therapies under that umbrella, emotion-focused therapy. I also use prolonged grief disorder treatment with clients, or any approach that is evidence-backed and that really is focusing more on the body and the emotions than on the mind. We want less talking, more feeling. So this is a very different type of therapy than traditional psychoanalysis. And what we're doing with these tools and with the therapist, working with the nervous system, we are here to rewire maladaptive and unhelpful neurological pathways and basically heal the sensitivity of our nervous system to certain stressors. We are lowering our distress around certain triggers we've identified to increase our ability to overcome tolerable stress, in general, learn how to more positively cope with and release stress when it's safe and appropriate. And finally, we're learning how to deepen into positive emotions and positive perceptions about ourselves. So back to our formula, let's start with step 1, identifying the unconscious core beliefs you have about yourself. 4 core beliefs, these are usually something that we haven't put words to. They're unconscious, and we may not even consciously agree with them. For example, if I have an unconscious core belief that comes from past painful experiences that I am a terrible person, I may not believe that I am a terrible person in my daily conscious life, but that doesn't mean that unconscious belief isn't still present in my brain, body, and nervous system and impacting the way that I perceive myself and my reality, at least until I'm able to look at and heal that negative belief that I am a terrible person. So in order to get clear on our unconscious beliefs, our deepest beliefs and feelings about ourselves come up the most clearly in times of significant stress. When you are feeling triggered, down, embarrassed, ashamed, guilty, or afraid. How do you speak to and treat yourself in those moments? That's one of the ways you can start to see where your unconscious sense of yourself is at. When you're trying to put words to this at first, stick with simple sentences. We want some kind of typically like I am statement, something that's focused on like you and how you perceive yourself. And we want a simple sentence because we want to imagine something that a child could say about themselves, maybe even you as a child. And that's because a lot of our unconscious core beliefs come from childhood, where our brain is still developing, we're still developing a sense of identity, or they also can come from significant and repetitive adult experiences. Working with my clients, some of the most common examples that I've seen of negative core beliefs include there is something wrong with me, I am different, I hear different versions of like I am bad. For some people that feels like I am too much, and for others that may feel like I am not enough, I am not good enough. And we also have more safety focused core beliefs. I am not safe, I can't protect myself, or I have to be in control. Generally, negative core beliefs echo a sentiment, I am not, and I cannot. And we all also already have positive core beliefs about ourselves. It's just a question of are those strong or are those like something that you aren't accessing a lot of the time and therefore weaker. But our positive core beliefs, when you're in touch with those, that's giving us a sense of I am and I can. And as you dig into yourself and your most significant memories and experiences, you will find a few particularly impactful and recurring core beliefs that you've been carrying for a long time, some of which may have been causing you pain for a long time, and others, those positive beliefs that have actually been helping you, even without you realizing it potentially. Finally, these core beliefs are easier to identify with the help of another person. Again, let's bring that therapist in. You're using that person as a mirror and really kind of going back and forth conversationally so you can narrow in on the core belief that is really the most suited to you in particular. And then with this person, you will be dividing up the negative and unhelpful beliefs you have about yourself, as well as the positive and helpful beliefs that you have, which is going to take us into our second step of the formula, healing negative events and unconscious core beliefs. Shifting negative and unconscious beliefs that we have about ourselves starts with re-experiencing old, stored, or even repressed painful emotions, events, and beliefs. This is where we're looking at some form of exposure. And exposure is helpful because it's unlocking frozen, stressful, or traumatic memories. And by healing those frozen, stressful experiences, we are also healing the negative perceptions of ourselves that those past stressful events created. And those negative perceptions of ourselves, most of the time, were never even true, but we've been carrying them with us all this time, so they've certainly by now become outdated and are unhelpful. This is especially the case for beliefs we develop in childhood and adolescence. This is a developmental stage where we are still trying to understand ourselves and build identity. So everything kind of feels like it's about us. We are more prone to taking things personally as children, and therefore at a higher risk of internalizing blame to cope with negative situations or situations that were out of our control. I want to make this specific and concrete by bringing in another example. Let's talk about bullying for someone who experienced bullying, let's say in middle school. In reality, bullying is just a reflection of the low self-worth of the bullies. No one is going to hurt another person and intentionally cause them pain if they aren't in pain themselves and suffering from low self-worth and insecurity. But for the person who is being bullied, this may create a false perception for them that they are different than their friends or that they are unwanted. And if they aren't receiving support, if they don't get to have any kind of healing emotional experience to help them move through this and let go of it, they may end up carrying this belief of I am unwanted with them into their life, maybe even into their adult life. And then that unconscious belief can end up dictating their present day actions and fears. A lot of the times we see people trying to avoid feeling that way again. So that person might be trying to avoid feeling unwanted or any kind of experience where they could end up feeling unwanted or different than the people around them. So what we're doing, healing some of these past painful events and negative feelings about ourselves, is re-experiencing the stressful memory in a safe space with support. And again, this is when the time is right, when your basic needs are met and you're at a stable enough place in your life where you have some other coping tools. And when you are in that right place, you have that support, you're doing exposure work, you're re-experiencing these stressful memories, and we're using a tool for this process called dual attention stimulation. Fancy language basically to say you're re-experiencing the past event with one foot in the past and one foot in the present. And that one foot in the present is helping you stay connected to, I am here in my body now, I am in this room, I am safe now. So we have an awareness of both the past and the present happening at the same time. And after we've gone through this process, we've exposed ourselves to that past experience, we've reminded ourselves that we're safe now, we basically are desensitizing that trigger, we're lowering the volume dial down on how much stress and how much of that negative emotion is connected to that experience until ideally all the stress is gone from that past memory. The way that feels is you still have that memory, it's not changing in your brain, but when you think about it, you're almost watching something play on a movie screen. You're watching something that happened to you. You know what happened to you, but you're no longer being sent back into that moment and reliving that memory and those painful feelings over and over again. You see, this is the past. I can observe this and stay here and now. Once you're at that process of having desensitized that trigger or that fear response, we get to the third and last step of our formula. This is where we're getting to reinforce the positive beliefs you have about yourself. We are bringing the adaptive neural network, the prefrontal cortex, back online, and we're then getting to strengthen the neurological web of past and present positive experiences that you have. We're helping that neurological web of positive core beliefs wire and fire together more frequently and therefore more easily. And through that process, the intensity of the positive emotions and beliefs you have about yourself will increase. So let's take our example with bullying. We've gone through the process with exposure of re-experiencing those past events. That person has re-experienced the bullying that happened, and then also gone through and healed any of the connected events in that neurological web that tie into the belief of them feeling unwanted. The distress on those events has been lowered. And then what they're getting to do in this last stage is increase the positive emotions associated with events where they felt worthy and loved. So you're really reinforcing that positive neurological web of associations. And this is, in this final stage, the process where we get to strengthen and really reconnect to that state of being or state of mind that we can access when our nervous system is relaxed, our prefrontal cortex is online, we're in touch with ourself or our wise mind, so to speak. We're reinforcing the strength of that state of being by coming back to it more and more frequently and in a deeper way. So finally, I want to close with, if you don't have access to therapy at this time, how can you get started and what are some tools that can help outside of therapy for healing unconscious beliefs you have about yourself? I'm going to talk through some options. This list is by no means comprehensive. These are just some of the things that I know, that my clients have tried, and that I've seen work for others. So I'd really love to hear if y'all have other body-focused tools and strategies, tools for re-experiencing and letting go of painful emotions. Share that in the comments so we can learn more from you. Let me know what I'm missing in this list. What I want to start with in terms of other non-therapy based strategies, one other program I've come across that is research-based is Lacey Phillips' program To Be Magnetic, which is also a subconscious reprogramming tool and basically involves like deep guided meditations you're going through to build unconditional self-worth. Other tools, for facilitating deep somatic and emotional healing can include breath work, body-focused meditation. We might be looking at guided spiritual or religious experiences. I was talking to someone the other day that shared with me how impactful sweat lodges were for them. You can also be looking at intensive physical movement, sports if you love sports, dance, especially like coordinated group movement, social movement can be really healing. And we're just looking at these tools and like types of movement where we get to express and bring up old tension in our bodies and release that old tension in an emotionally safe and connected space. So this can also include consensual and healing sexual experiences. Finally, the last approach I want to mention, again with guidance, and this is most suitable if you do not have a family history of serious mental health issues or substance abuse, is the intentional use of psychedelics or psychedelic-assisted therapy. Within a safe container, psychedelics also help us shift the wiring of established neural pathways. We're increasing our neuroplasticity and our flexibility for how we adapt and respond, especially to stress. And you can deepen the connection that you have to yourself and to others through using these tools. So hey, we started off this video talking about re-experiencing frozen and stressful memories. We're closing talking about sex and drugs. Hopefully this is reinforcing that yes, these strategies at first may bring up some intense and even painful feelings, but eventually you will get to feel a deep release, a catharsis, almost like a physical and emotional cleansing. And where you'll end up by the end of these processes is really deep feelings of empowerment and even liberation. So these tools, by the end of your work with them, are helping you access even deeper and healing positive emotions and beliefs about yourself. So, thank you for listening. This is where we're going to close for this series on unconditional self-worth. The next series coming up, I'm going to talk about enmeshment. We'll do a deep dive into the difference between empathy and compassion. So subscribe to this channel, stay tuned to this content. And thank you for giving yourself the gift of listening through to this series and learning more about how to connect to an unconditional sense of your own worth.